Okay, here we are. This is part 2 of our Social Security lesson, and this one's a little shorter. We've got the basics down for you, right? And now let's talk a little bit about a few special situations that most of us are going to encounter during the course of our retirement or in the years leading up to it. So, like I said in the last thing, and I'm just going to briefly recap this, you got to know your full retirement age, and there's a chart I gave you that will show you that. And then you got to know your primary insurance amount, because those are the two important things. Whenever you talk about any Social Security decision, it comes down to these two numbers that you're going to get from the FRA and the PIA, okay? Not the most exciting stuff in the world, but if you're going to make a Social Security decision, these are a couple things that are just part of the equation. You can't make a good decision unless you know those. Like I said, that full retirement age is based on your year of birth. And that's probably going to change again as we go forward, but at least for right now, in my case, you see the red circle for someone born in 55. I was born in 56, so at 66 and 4 months is when I hit full retirement age. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about once you're getting ready to make these retirement decisions, what happens with Social Security and marriage. And the first thing is that a spouse is entitled to his or her own Social Security check. Now, when Social Security was invented, many women were stay-at-home moms, and so they came up with a provision to take care of women who were stay-at-home moms, and they said, we will take care of them, with half of the husbands, and I'll cover that in a second, but at least know that if you had your own career, as most of us do now, you have a choice. You can look at your own Social Security benefit when you get to retirement age, and that's based on your PIA and your FRA, right? All that stuff. Or you can also get one half of your spouse's. So, in other words, if you remember back to the last chapter, we had a guy whose PIA was $2,300 a month. Well, his wife, when she reaches full retirement age, would be entitled to half of that. So their check combined would be 150% of Joe's. Now, you got to know when you look at this that the spouse's check is also based on her age when she starts to collect and on the amount that her husband is collecting. So if a husband starts collecting when he's 64 and a wife starts collecting when she's 62, there's a lot of math involved there, but basically it's going to be smaller because everything is still based on each recipient's full retirement age. And like I said, go to socialsecurity.gov and you'll just see what the numbers are for you. But this is the most important part of this, is this basic thing. It's still based, like I said, on PIA and FRA. Now, when one spouse passes away, one of the checks goes away. So it works out, and I'll cover widowhood in a minute, but this is something we need to plan for ahead of time when we talk about that. And I want to give you an example or two of that as we get further ahead. Now, before we get to widowhood, let's talk a little bit about divorce. And the thing with divorce is you can collect based on the record of your ex-spouse. And what I'm talking about here is if you were a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom and your Social Security was relatively small based on your earning history by the time you get to retirement age, as long as you were married for 10 years, you are entitled to get half of your spouse's Social Security, just as if you were still married. Now, you don't have to ask your spouse this. You don't have to find out where they are. You don't have to know anything about them. All you have to do is be able to document it. And if you can document that you were married for at least 10 years, then you can just go on in and be entitled to a number based on half of theirs. Now, it depends on when they start to collect and when you start to collect. But as long as you, as it says here, as long as you've been divorced for 2 years, your spouse, in this case it's a he, does not have to apply for benefits in order for you to receive yours. So you might be in a position where you need Social Security at age 62 or 3 or 4, and your spouse doesn't plan to collect until your ex-spouse until he's 70. Well, that's okay. You still have the ability to collect based on your own age and his primary insurance amount or the amount he's collecting. So all you have to do is Social Security, your proof of marriage or proof of divorce, and you can do this. So these are not going to be lucrative checks. Nobody's going to get rich getting half of their spouse's Social Security. But it's at least you should know that you have an option to collect on your own or to collect based on your spouse's record. Okay, and it's still, like I said, I'm not going to get into the math in this here because that's complicated, but you can go on the worksheet or you can call me up and I'll help you with it. But it's still dependent upon your age when you start to collect and what the primary insurance amount for your ex-spouse would be. So if it's somebody who was, your ex-spouse is doing really well, maybe they're a CEO or a surgeon or something, making a whole lot of money, it's worth checking to see if half of theirs would, based on their record, would be more than your own Social Security based on your earnings history. So that's a good thing to know, and it comes up quite a bit. Now, I've been through this. I haven't had Social Security ramifications from it, but as widowhood, as a widower, if you're both married, right, and still married, I should say, and one of you passes away, then that person's check is going to stop. Okay, so you'll go from getting 2 checks to just 1. Now, your survivor benefit will still equal whatever the higher check was. So if, for example, Joe there was collecting $2,300 a month, and his wife, based on her earnings record, was collecting $2,600 a month, then she would keep her own, but his check goes away. So that's when we sit down to do retirement planning, we want to think about that because very few of us die at the exact same time that our spouse does. So we want to have some type of planning in place to replace that lost check. Now, if somebody's got a big surplus in their income monthly and they don't have to replace it, that's fine. But if you've got a couple who is really depending on every dollar coming in on that Social Security, we want to, through a financial planning ahead of time, either have assets set aside in retirement accounts or some other accounts to replace that income, or perhaps we want to look into some type of life insurance so that we are able to replace that lost check. Because in a lot of cases, not only do you lose a check on the death of a spouse, you may lose an entire pension check, or you may lose half of the pension check or something like that. So these are all things we want to do ahead of time. We don't want to be surprised during retirement if we were to find out that all of a sudden our income is cut in half. So that's something that, again, requires a little financial planning as we do it. That's the most important parts of Social Security when it comes to little extras, and I didn't want to put it in the first one because I ran a little long. And all of these you can get more information on if you go to socialsecurity.gov or work with a professional like myself, and we can help you make those decisions. Like I said, we have really cool financial planning software that can show us at what age we recommend that you take Social Security and what things you need to do to start to plan for that. And then also what happens if we were to have one of the spouses pass away at an earlier age, or or a divorce comes along. How do we plan for some of these contingencies that might happen during retirement? I think you need to know, and you probably already do, that Social Security decisions are amongst the most important decisions you'll ever make in your life. Because the difference between claiming at, say, 62 versus 70 later in life can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the decisions that go around this are pretty complicated. And I know, like I said, I've been doing this a long, long time. And 35, 36 years ago, Social Security was pretty straightforward. And almost everybody collected at 62 because the math to wait wasn't usually in your favor. But now we're finding that, waiting until you're 70 is probably the way to go for a lot of people. But not all of us have the opportunity to wait that long. Some of us have health issues and some of us have some other things. Let me tell you something I meant to tell you too. I just thought of it. One time I had a fella, and this comes up often in financial planning circles, right? I had a guy who was 69 years old and still not collecting Social Security. And his wife was a little younger than he was. He was 60, she was 66. And he had a terminal illness. And it was an unfortunate situation, and he eventually passed away. But he said, don't you think I should just collect Social Security right now and at least get something out of it? And we looked at the numbers, and I was like, yeah, you could do that. You'll get your checks for however long you're able to get them. But don't forget, your widow's benefit is based on the amount you collect. So if you could either not take it while you're alive, or wait to take it until you turn 70, which is the longest you can wait, then the survivor's check, the bigger check of the two that will go to your wife, will be based on that higher number. So in this case, we had the fellow who had a terminal illness and he was trying to do the best he could for his wife and family. We had him not take Social Security. And so then by the time that he was 70 years old, he passed away shortly after, but his widow was able to get the larger check that he would have gotten. So that, it's not all cut and dry. Every circumstance is a little bit different, and I think you need to know that as we go forward from here. So hope this helped. This was fundamentals. We got to know how Social Security works before you do anything else. And I promised in the next lesson we'll talk about something a little more fun. Hope it helps. Let me know if we can fill in any gaps for you, or if you need to work with us professionally. That's why we're doing these. We'd be happy to talk about helping you if we can. Thanks. Bye.